Thank you guys for coming out today in this beautiful Toronto weather. My name is Anoosha Syed, and before we begin, I just want to mention that this is my first time presenting in front of a group of adults. Usually my audience is full of 5-year-olds who ask me what my favorite dinosaur is. It's a T-Rex, by the way. So I am a freelance illustrator. My main focus is on children's publishing, but I also dabble in things like packaging illustration, editorial, posters, and greeting cards. I also work as a freelance character designer for animation, mostly helping develop character designs for preschool TV shows. Some of my past clients have included, actually wait, there you go, sorry, this is me. Some of my past clients have included Netflix, Google, DreamWorks TV, and Disney Junior, and I have illustrated over 20 picture books. That includes picture books, young chapter books, and covers as well. So I'm going to go a little bit into my background. I grew up mostly in the Middle East. I eventually moved to Switzerland, and I got my bachelor's in fine arts from there at a teeny tiny school called Ceruleum. My graduating class was literally 10 people. After graduating, I moved here to Canada, and I did two things. One, because I always wanted to work in animation, I joined a studio here called Industrial Brothers. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's like on King East, I believe, working on a show called Doc. Around the same time, I had also joined an illustration agency, and I started working on children's books on the side. While I was doing that, I kind of realized that children's illustration was my real passion, and after about a year of working in animation, I realized I have to quit my job. And so that was 5 years ago, and I've just been a freelance illustrator ever since. So in this presentation today, I'm going to be talking about quite a few things, mainly how to become a children's book illustrator, how to get your start finding gigs and things like contracts, negotiations, and all of that good stuff. So first of all, because this is Max the Mud, I assume most of you guys are in animation or comics, but are any of you actually interested in a career in illustration? Raise your hands. Okay, cool. So the reason I asked this is actually there's quite a bit of overlap between all 3 of these careers. Like, I've dabbled in all of them, and I'm actually going to go into it a little bit later. So what exactly is an illustrator? I would define an illustrator as a commercial artist who communicates ideas to an audience or a client, usually alongside some text. This is different from a fine artist who don't necessarily need to communicate with their audience. So illustration itself is a pretty wide umbrella encompassing a lot of different areas you could work in. And I have, like I mentioned, I've worked in animation, comics, and illustration. And if you have a flexible portfolio, you are able to do that. So here are a couple of different branches that fall under illustration. The first one is publishing. This is the one that I'm most familiar with and the one that I'm going to be talking about the most. This can include picture books, young adult covers, nonfiction, and graphic novels. People who are illustrators can also end up working in animation and video games. This is because illustrators have a great sense of color and design. So I know a lot of illustrators who have gone into, I know a lot of people in animation who have later gone into illustration and vice versa, but some careers you can find are character design, color styling, and visual development. Some other branches of illustration could be product design, communication design, scientific illustration, and editorial. I would just mention that with scientific illustration, you usually need some kind of background in sciences as well. That is the only one I haven't done yet, and I don't plan to. So I'm a freelancer, and while there are a lot of jobs out there for illustrators that do involve having a studio job, like a regular 9-to-5 gig, freelancers, it's different for freelancers, and if you're a freelancer, you are probably going to be by yourself. A lot of people are surprised to find out that illustration only makes about 40% of my job, like actual drawing time. I have a lot of other hats to wear because I'm by myself, and I'm technically a self-employed business person. So some of these hats that you have to wear are being an accountant, You don't have HR giving you a paycheck every 2 weeks, so you gotta make sure you're getting yourself paid, you're making sure that you have your finances managed. That means chasing after late payments, filing your taxes, which is really gross, and the rest of like your business management if you ever decide that you want to incorporate yourself or that's other stuff which I don't understand. You also kind of have to be a lawyer. I thankfully have an agent, and I'm going to talk about that further, but even if you don't have an agent, you do need to have a certain understanding of contracts and wages. You need to be able to understand your contract, be able to negotiate it so you don't end up getting screwed over by your clients. But the most important is being a marketer. 90% of the jobs that I've gotten is because of me putting myself out there and finding the work myself. And this mostly involves having my portfolio, promoting my work over social media, networking at places like conventions and conferences, and then doing the hard work of sending out postcards, emails, newsletters, networking, and good old-fashioned cold calling. So, you guys are in school currently. You are learning all kinds of artsy things with your big, beautiful brains, and eventually you're going to graduate. And then what? This is a question I get asked most by students, is how exactly to start their freelance illustration career after graduating. And thankfully, I have 4 steps for you. Ta-da! Okay. Number 1, this is the most important one and the one that I can't really help you out with. You need to make sure your work is at a level that you are proud of and at like a hireable level. I'm going to be teaching you a lot of tips and tricks today, but unfortunately they're not going to mean much if your work isn't at a professional standard yet. The thing is, you can always improve. Like, I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I can always improve. 10 years down the line, I can still improve. And so I am going to be sharing a couple of resources that you can use to your advantage, which I will share later on. And don't worry, I'm going to make sure this presentation is available for you later if you want to just, write things down. But number 2, if you do feel like your art is ready to share with the world, then you need to share it with the world. And that means having an online portfolio, a curated selection of your best work, and then having a social media presence as well, so that you can share it with more people and more people can see it. Number 3 is making connections. This is what I talked about earlier about doing the hard work of getting jobs. This means connecting with possible clients via submissions, emails, conventions, and networking. Number 4, business management. I'm still figuring this out. I'm going to talk briefly about this, but I would recommend, there are a lot of courses around the city that can help you a little bit further. Like, I know there are quite a few tax workshops going on currently that can help you with this. But in general, business management means that you don't have HR, you don't have a supervisor telling you how to manage your schedule. So you need to make sure that you're managing your time and your money. So if you've got these 4 steps down, then hopefully you have a gig or 2 and hooray, you're an illustrator. Okay, I'm going to go into detail on each of these 4 steps, but number 1, how to get good. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a list of resources that you guys can look into later. For example, live drawing classes around the city. There's this one called Tunes on Tap, which happens twice a month. I don't know if they're still going on or not, but it's basically people in cosplay, which is kind of fun. So you get to dress like Spider-Man. It's fun. Also things like online references, YouTubers, courses you can take, and books and stuff. Okay, if you do feel like your work is ready to share with the world, you're going to need to have an online portfolio. It's really great that everything's being done online now, because back in the day, you would have to carry around a physical portfolio and mail it to people. But thankfully, you can just go on the internet, which is great. But anyway, here are a couple of website builders. These are all pay to use, usually starting about $5 a month. Personally, I love using Squarespace. I've been using it for 5 years now. I like it because it's clean, easy to use, a lot of different templates to choose from, and it has additional integrations. Like if you ever want to have an online store, it has that function. Wix is the only one I believe that allows you to use it for free if you're okay with having the .wix.com domain. I would just say that if you are able to, please get a domain name. I got mine from GoDaddy.com. I believe it was $2 for the first 2 years, and then $25 per year after, which I know it's a bit much, but like I believe it's an investment, and honestly, it just makes your website look more professional and credible. However, if you feel like, I know this is quite a bit of money, but like if you feel like you need some other options, these are some other acceptable platforms. Tumblr, Behance, ArtStation are all really good. They have the added advantage of also having an online community surrounding it, so that, you know, for example, Tumblr, like if you're posting your work there, you have the option of retweeting it and sharing it with more people, so more people, you know, can get more viral. With Tumblr, please, artwork only. You know, I don't want to see any memes or cat gifs or fanfics on there. Keep it as clean and neat as possible. I believe with Tumblr and Behance, it has the added option of making it, you have like a premium version if you ever wanted to upgrade your site. I'm going to be talking about some examples of what makes a good portfolio. That's my portfolio right over there. I think it's pretty good. There are, a lot of people ask me if multiple styles are okay in your portfolio. And the thing is, yes, that's fine as long as you're doing it in the right way. Like art directors, they are not going to get confused. They understand that artists have range and they can have different styles, but they need to be sure that you're doing it because it's intentional and not because you're inconsistent. So, for example, if you have all of your styles all in just like one page, it can look kind of cluttered and a little bit confusing. So one of the ways you can go around it is to make sure everything is categorized accordingly. So maybe you could have a page for a style that's very graphic, or a page that's very, like, it's suited for line art. Personally, I have it sectioned off by industry, so you can't see it very clearly, but I have a section for illustration, books, and visual development. Because my style slightly differs for each of these industries. And also, if I have a certain client from a specific industry, and they're asking for my portfolio, I can just send them the portfolio of the specific link so they can see the work that's relevant to them. And speaking of, you want to keep your portfolio relevant to the work you want to be hired for. So if you, for example, you want to go into children's books, you want to create very cute preschooly art, but your portfolio is currently full of like sci-fi, adult fantasy, I don't know, like just booby ladies or something. You're probably not going to get hired for children's books because a client is going to see your portfolio, they're not going to find any examples of it, and they're not going to take the risk because they don't know if you can do it. So if you want to do children's books, you need to make sure you have the appropriate samples in your portfolio. Quality over quantity, that's pretty self-explanatory. You are going to be judged by the worst piece in your portfolio, so, you know, less is more. Keep your contact information clear, make it easy for clients to find you. I've heard of instances of art directors, they'll go to someone's portfolio and be like, oh yeah, this stuff is great, I really want to work with them, and they'll go try to find their email address, and then, you know, it's just nowhere to be found. And they're not going to put in the time to like really dig for it, and then, you know, they'll pass you up and go to someone else. So just make it really, really easy to find you, like on your portfolio and on your social media. Lastly, fan art is generally okay, as long as if it's a decent interpretation, you're doing something new with it. I don't want to see you like copy pasting a stock photo of Sonic the Hedgehog, slightly changing the colors and saying, original character, do not steal. You know, like fan art is okay in that sense, but I've actually gotten work in the past because of my fan art. A couple of years ago, I did a series on modern Disney princesses. This was back before no one had done it before, okay? But basically, like, it had become viral. And eventually Disney Publishing saw it, they loved the fan art, and they wanted me to do a chapter book series based on Disney princesses, all because of fan art. Okay, these are examples of good portfolio. Bad portfolio is basically the opposite. Having too much artwork, lack of focus and style, outdated work. You know, if you have work that's not really a good reflection of the work you have currently, like either it's a style that's not representative of you, or if it's just old, just get rid of it. Low resolution or low quality artwork, broken links everywhere, unreadable text, and hard to get in touch with you. Okay, so what I was talking about before, if you want to go into children's books but you don't have examples of it, like I understand you guys are in school right now, you probably don't have the relevant experience yet. So what do? Your portfolio is a reflection of the work you can do as well as what you want to do. And so personal projects are really good for this. So some personal projects you could do, because like if you don't have the relevant experience, you can make stuff up. Not like make up credentials, but just like make artwork. So for example, if you want to work in children's books, you can illustrate some spreads of a story, like a fairy tale or an original idea that you might have. When I was in my last year of school, I came up with a concept for my thesis, and I illustrated an entire picture book, and that was one of the main things that I put in my portfolio. Other things you could do would be redesigning the cover of your favorite book, creating album art for your favorite singer, just like anything you're really passionate about. On the opposite hand, you could do something that's a little bit different. There's this thing that I used to do in my editorial illustration class where every week we would pick up the newspaper and randomly select an article, and we would have to draw a spot illustration for it. Obviously, like there'd be a lot of times where the article is just like not inspiring at all, and it would be really hard to come up with an idea, but you'd have to do it. And this was a really great exercise because it would get you out of your comfort zone, and in the real world, you're not always going to be drawing things you like. So it's a nice challenge. So these are all stuff that you can do. Obviously, there are a lot of other ideas that you can put in, but the idea is to have maybe 3 or 4 of these personal projects if you want to fill up your portfolio until eventually you have proper gigs and you can put those in your portfolio instead. Apart from your portfolio, you should also be working on your social media. Social media is literally how I get work. Like 90% of the jobs I get, I'm so thankful for social media. It has its cons, but like for the most part, this is a lifesaver for illustrators. There are a lot of platforms out there, but Instagram and Twitter is a must. Instagram is basically, having a mini portfolio that you can share around. Twitter is for making connections. It's super ideal. It's been really, really helpful for me. A lot of people ask me, like, is it okay if I don't have a lot of people following me? And honestly, it's fine. You don't need a million people following you. It's all about who is following you. So like, if you have a few followers, that's okay, as long as it's the right people. But if you do want to grow your following, I think Allison might have talked about this last month if you guys were there at that, but posting regularly, because that's the only thing that the algorithm favors now. Taking advantage of hashtags. Some hashtags I've done in the past that were relevant for me at least were hashtag women in animation and hashtag, I think it was like South Asian illustrators. Obviously there are other ones as well, but they're a really great way to spread your art out there. Monthly events like Inktober, Mermaid, taking advantage of trends like drawing Baby Yoda or something. But like, at the end of the day, please draw what you're passionate about. People will be drawn to that at the end. So Twitter is key for connecting with art directors, industry pros, and recruiters. Same as LinkedIn. Don't discount LinkedIn. I know it seems like a really boring platform that your dad uses, but like it's actually really helpful and the key way that I find contacts. So the reason basically how I find these people is either by searching on Twitter, and also just they kind of show up in my explore feed. But the reason why I connect with these people is that, one, if you follow them, they might follow you back, and then that just means that they're aware of your work and they'll keep you in mind. But also, recruiters are often going to post job openings, and art directors are going to have call to arts. And so call to arts are basically an art director posting like, hey, I have this project, comment below with like comment your portfolio and I'll see if you guys are a fit. So I actually had one of my projects happen because of Twitter. This was a book I did last year called I Am Perfectly Designed, that was written by Karamo Brown, one of the guys from Queer Eye. And so basically what happened was that I was following this art director. She posted, hey guys, I'm looking for an illustrator who can do greenery and has like a really nice style, please comment below with your portfolio. I was one of the people who did that. I ended up being selected and I got a gig because of that tweet, which is pretty cool. But as always, make sure whatever interactions you have with these professionals, keep a level of professionalism. I know with social media, it kind of feels like those boundaries are a little bit unclear because everything is kind of out in the public and everyone's talking very openly. But these are still, they're possible clients and people you should treat with respect. Don't go into people's DMs unless they say it's okay, and just, be professional. All right, so you have your online portfolio, you have your social media. How do you make money from it? This is where the hard work comes in. We are going to be getting your first gig now. This means submissions. I hate this part, but basically what you're going to be doing is, hopefully with all the social media-ing that you've been doing, you might have connected with a couple of art directors and people. And so what you want to do is have an Excel file of some kind, and then you are going to keep a record of all of these art directors, recruiters, studios, whatever, people that you would like to work with and their contact information. And you're going to keep updating this regularly as time goes on. Other ways you can find these contacts would be researching magazines, publishers, studios that would commission work similar to yours. Don't bother with places where your style wouldn't be a fit because they're probably not going to contact you. Just doing a quick Google search, you can find a lot of people, as well as like looking at what your favorite artists have been involved in. So when you're doing this research of all of these people you want to work with, you want to go to their website and you want to see if they have a submissions page. So you might have to dig around a little bit for it, but it's usually you scroll to the very bottom where all the navigation is, and it's either going to be a like contact, or in the FAQ, or an actual submissions page. And so that submissions page is going to have the information of where you can submit an email with your, hey, this is me, this is my portfolio, I'd like to work with you information. If you want to work in editorial, a thing that I used to do when I started out was going to bookstores and then checking out the big old magazine aisle, and then checking out all of the magazines that had illustrations, and especially ones with a similar style to mine. And then you go to the page that's before the table of contents, and it's the page that has everyone who worked on that issue. And so there's going to either be a note that says you can submit your stuff here, or you're going to have the name and the contact information of the art director. So anyway, you're going to collect all of these people and you're going to start submitting to them, send them emails, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. But apart from that, you can also start small, check out local magazines and businesses. Like for example, does your local community theater need a poster for their latest production? You're going to be sending out a lot of emails, like 50 plus. You're going to be emailing every day, but there is a chance that you might get rejections and you might get no response at all. This is fine, like it happens, but it is fine to reach out again after several months if you feel like you have a significant update in your portfolio and you've really reworked it and there's something new to show to them. But don't harass them. So I mentioned a lot of places that you can submit to, like places you can research. But in terms of publishers, a lot of the major publishers, unfortunately, they don't accept submissions unless you have an agent. Which kind of sucks, but I'll get into agents later. So I encourage you guys to do your research, but here is a list of publishers who I believe are currently accepting submissions. Again, this presentation should be available to you afterwards so you guys can send them emails. Okay, in the submissions email, you want to make sure on that website page, if they do have a submissions page, they are probably going to have a set of instructions to follow. So you want to make sure you follow those requirements exactly. Some people might ask for a specific number of images, or they will only accept low-res files or files of a certain dimension, or they might ask for a PDF, but make sure you follow those rules, because if you don't, it's a good way to, be discarded before they even get a chance to look at your work. Since you're going to be emailing a lot of people, it's fine if you have a general template email that you copy and paste just make sure you adjust it to fit their needs, and you make sure to change the company name so you don't end up with like an awkward situation of calling Kelly Susan or something. Whenever possible, find the art director's name and spell it correctly. I'm not a huge fan of dear sir / madam or dear to whom it may concern. It does feel copy-pasty and kind of impersonal. If you're able to find their contact information or like their name on LinkedIn or Twitter, that's great, but otherwise you could go for something like Do the Walrus Magazine Team. Make sure the email is short and sweet. They're going to be going through a lot of them. If you include your portfolio or any social links, make sure they're linked up so they don't have to copy and paste that into their browser, because some people might not bother to do it. And finally, if you don't get a response, don't lose hope, because sometimes they might not have a project for you at this moment, but they still like your work. So sometimes they're just going to keep your information on file and contact you when the time comes. Because I believe there's this one time where I submitted my work to a publisher and I didn't hear back from them after a year and a half, and I was like, wait, who is this? I took the job though, so it's fine. Okay, for your submissions email, this is a general template that you could follow. I'm going to go over it briefly. Dear human person, this is their name, hopefully. Hello, I'm Anoosha Syed. I'm a freelance illustrator based in Toronto, and I received your contact information at, this is in case you want to name drop if you got that information from someone. I want to send my portfolio for consideration for any possible design work that I might be a fit for at company name. I'd love to work with you because, and this is where you explain why you want to work with them so much. I previously put in your work experience. If you don't have work experience, you can at least mention what your skills are. Your website can be found here, and you've also attached your resume, PDF, etc. This is optional. This depends on what the requirements are. You can also find me at social media links. If you need any more information, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for your time and have a great day. Besides submitting emails to like a bunch of people, these are a couple other ways you can find work. One of them is conventions. I love attending conventions. I go to maybe 3 of them a year. Some ones that I've found have been good for children's illustration would be TCAF, VanCAF. If you're more on the animation side, then CTN and Lightbox Expo. If you want to go to Europe, then the Bologna Children's Book Fair is really great. And I went to New York Comic Con last year, and that was surprisingly really great too, because they have a very large section specifically for publishers. So if you're going to a convention, make sure you have your portfolio around, either printed out into a physical book or an iPad so you can show it to professionals who might be there. Sometimes a publisher or like a studio or whatever, they're going to have a booth set up and they might offer portfolio reviews. If they don't do that, then at least they're going to have the business cards with contact information so you can submit your work later. Personally, I don't think I've ever gone to a convention as an attendee. I always go to table. Like, I love tabling. I do it mostly because I sell stuff. Like, I have an online store and I have my books and everything. But you're gonna have like a lot of these recruiter, art director, publishing people walking around the floor as well, specifically looking for talent. And having a table is great because you don't have to go to people, they come to you, and you basically have your portfolio out in front of you anyway. So a lot of the times when I go to a convention, I'll usually end up with a bunch of business cards and possible job offers for people, which is, and I'm like sitting the whole time, which is great. And then, of course, make sure you have business cards. This is just in general. I've gotten my business cards from Moo in the past. They are a little expensive, but they're really pretty. But now I started using Vistaprint. Vistaprint, they are cheap, they look really good, and they always have some kind of deal going on. Apart from conventions, you can also do mailers. Mailers I have never done, but people do them. It used to be like what people did in the past, but it's a good way to stand out now because I feel like people don't do them as much anymore. But finding an art director or publisher's mailing address and then sending them a physical mailer postcard of your work or something a little bit more creative. Like I've heard of people sending stickers, magnets, calendars, and even bookmarks. This is just like a possible resource if you wanted to look into it later, but this is a bunch of places where you can find gigs as well. This is not really professional. This is just like people who are like, hey, I have a possible gig. It's a good way to find work when you're starting off. I don't super recommend these because they're mostly small projects and some of the clients can be iffy, but you know, if you're looking for work, you're looking for work. Okay, so hopefully with all of this portfolio, social media stuff you've been doing, you might have gotten a client come to you and they're like, hey, we are interested in working with you. How much do you charge? And I hate this question. Basically, there are so many factors that come into play when pricing yourself. It's really difficult. I'm glad, again, that I have an agent who does this for me. But basically, the number one thing you need to know is you never work for free. You deserve to be paid. Illustration is a valid career. You would never ask your plumber to work for free. Sometimes you might get a client who's like, oh yeah, we can't pay you in money, but we can pay you in exposure. You know, we've got like a bunch of followers, it'll be great. But in my experience, even if a client has like 500,000 followers, it really isn't worth it. It doesn't translate into new clients because the right people aren't seeing your work. And at the end of the day, like, you know, you gotta pay the bills. So instead of working for free for a client, you can instead take that time you would spend working for them and instead work on yourself, either by creating new pieces for your portfolio or, you know, marketing yourself. In general, you know, don't undercut your fees. Undercutting harms everyone apart from yourself because you're being paid not your worth. If you accept a project for a lower fee, you lower that value for all other artists, and you basically set up that reputation for yourself as well. If a client comes to you, you charge pretty less, they're gonna expect that for the rest of your life. In terms of spec work, so spec work is basically if a publisher comes to you or any client and then they have a project in mind, but they want to make sure you're the right fit first. They might be going to other people as well, they're just kind of testing it out. And they might ask you to do a sample just to see if you can work in the correct style or, you know, if you're the right fit. Spec work can be paid, it can be not paid, it depends, but it's kind of up to you to determine if it's worth the risk, because you're not guaranteed the job if you do that spec work. I mean, if it depends like how passionate you are about the project, but if the spec work that they're asking for is a lot, like if they're asking for like 15 characters or 20 pages or something, then that's work, and don't do that. Okay, in terms of pricing yourself, there are basically two ways you can charge people, and that's hourly rate or a flat rate. For an hourly rate, this is simple, but like make sure you're being paid at least more than minimum wage. If a client comes to you saying, hey, we have this project for you, we're gonna pay you $300. You think, $300, that's great, that's money. But if the project takes you 100 hours, then you're really only being paid $3 an hour, and that's not good. So make sure you're being paid more than that. To determine what your hourly rate is, what I like to do is work backwards. You kind of determine what you want to earn for the year first, and so you can do this by you want to take into account what your personal expenses are, your living expenses, what people your age would normally earn, things like that. And then, for example, if let's say you're aiming for 45,000, that would translate to, in a 40-hour work week, that would be $22.50 per hour. The thing is, you are not working a 40-hour work week. When you're working as a freelancer, you're generally not going to be working 9 to 5, and in fact, you're probably going to have